Is glucose your friend or your foe? Is glucose our friend or our foe? And why would I even ask such a question anyway? Should we even be paying attention to that word? Well, actually, we should be, because glucose, you see, has an important and essential job to do, because it's one of the body's major sources of fuel. In fact, right now, it's glucose that is fueling your body with energy. Energy to keep your brain working, your heart beating, and your muscles functioning. Hello friend, I'm Norma Elaine, and welcome back to the Plant-Powered Life, where we make health simple, practical, and evidence-informed. Now today, we're going to follow the journey of glucose. What is it, and why in fact do we need it? You see, we've heard so much about glucose, linking it to conditions such as prediabetes and diabetes, so much so that it's very easy to come away believing that glucose in and of itself is a great big problem. Well, glucose is a simple sugar. And before the word sugar frightens you, let's understand what that actually means. You see, when we eat carbohydrate-containing foods such as potatoes, oats, brown rice, beans, lentils, or fruit, our digestive system breaks down digestible carbohydrates into simple sugars, including glucose. Now that glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream, which is perfectly normal. In fact, that's why we have blood glucose in the first place. But the glucose is not supposed to simply remain circulating in the blood indefinitely. That glucose has work to do. Our cells need to use glucose as fuel. So that's the first really important thing I want you to remember today. Glucose has a purpose. It isn't something we're desperately trying to get rid of. Our bodies are designed to manage it. Think about everything that your body has already done today. You opened your eyes, perhaps you got out of bed, you walked, you talked, you thought, maybe you climbed some stairs, maybe you had some breakfast. And even if you were to sit perfectly still for the rest of this video, your body would still be incredibly busy. You see, your heart has to keep beating, your lungs have to keep breathing, your brain is processing information, your digestive system is working, your muscles are maintaining your posture, and your cells are repairing, communicating, and in fact carrying out countless chemical reactions. Now, my friend, all of that requires energy. But here's where we need to go one step deeper. You see, glucose is a fuel source. It isn't itself the final usable energy currency of the cell, because our cells produce something called ATP. Now, ATP is short for adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. But don't worry about those two words, because there won't be a test at the end. All I really want you to remember is ATP equals usable cellular energy. Now, if you've been following this series, you'll recognize the mitochondria. The mitochondria are the tiny structures inside many of our cells that play an enormously important role in energy production. Now, through cellular respiration, cells can extract energy from fuels such as glucose. And when oxygen is available, mitochondria can use products derived from glucose metabolism together with oxygen to generate large amounts of ATP. So let's make the journey really simple. Food, glucose, cells, mitochondria, ATP, straight into energy for life. That's why glucose matters. So glucose is fuel that can ultimately be used to help our cells to produce ATP. And oxygen plays a vital role in that energy producing process. So far, everything sounds wonderful, right? We eat, carbohydrate is digested, glucose becomes available, our cells can use it for fuel. So where does the problem begin then? Well, there's somebody else we need to meet. Enter insulin. You see, when glucose rises in the bloodstream after we eat, the pancreas responds by releasing a hormone called insulin. Now, you've probably heard insulin described as a key that unlocks the door of the cell. Now, that's a useful picture. But because we're keeping this channel simple and evidence-informed, let's make it slightly more accurate. Insulin is really more like a messenger. It doesn't need to climb inside the cell. Instead, it binds to receptors on the surface of the cells and it sends a signal. Now, in our skeletal muscles, for example, that signal helps to increase the movement of glucose transporters to the cell membrane. Let me simplify. Glucose is available, insulin sends the message, the cell responds, glucose can now be taken up. Beautiful. That's what we want. But now here's the problem. What happens when the cell doesn't respond properly anymore? Now our story changes. So imagine insulin arriving with its message. There's glucose available, but this time the response isn't quite as strong. So the pancreas compensates. It produces more insulin and the message gets louder. Initially, though, that can work. The pancreas may produce enough additional insulin to keep blood glucose within the normal range. And this is something I really want you to understand. You could be developing insulin resistance before your blood glucose becomes obviously high, because your body may be compensating by producing more insulin. But over time, you see, if tissues become increasingly resistant to insulin's effects and the pancreas can no longer compensate sufficiently, blood glucose can begin to rise, and that can move us towards prediabetes, and eventually, in some people, type 2 diabetes. So what do we call it when our tissues aren't responding to insulin as effectively as they should? We call it insulin resistance, and therein lies the problem. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Because you see, insulin resistance isn't simply that you ate sugar. Oh no. It's more complicated than that. Genetics can play a role. Physical activity matters. Sleep matters. Body composition matters. And excess body fat matters too, particularly when fat accumulates in places such as the liver and skeletal muscle. They can contribute significantly to insulin resistance. And this connects directly with what we've been learning about cell health. Certain fat-derived molecules accumulating inside muscle and liver cells can interfere with parts of the insulin signaling pathway. Remember that message from insulin? The cell isn't responding to it as effectively as it should. And I want to be careful here, because I know we often hear the phrase fat blocks the cell. That's a useful visual, but it isn't literally a piece of fat sitting at the cell door preventing insulin from entering. You see, the problem is that processes associated with excess intracellular fat can interfere with insulin signaling. And suddenly, our previous conversation about struggling cells becomes relevant, because we're beginning to see how the environment within and around our cells can affect the way those cells function. My friend, this became very personal for me. And it's one of the reasons I talk so much about nourishment rather than simply weight loss. So those of you who know my story will know that in 2020, I became seriously ill with COVID. I spent 5 weeks in hospital, including days in intensive care. And when I eventually came home, my recovery became my classroom. That in itself wasn't difficult for me, you see, because as a qualified lecturer for over 20 years, I've always been interested in the what, the whys, and the wherefores. Particularly as I had been a vegetarian for many years before transitioning into becoming a vegan. In fact, I'd been a vegan for at least 10 years up until the point of my becoming ill. But after everything I'd been through, I started looking at food differently. Instead of asking, is this vegan? My question became, am I nourishing my body? Now that was a very different question. It was during my convalescence that I learned about whole food, plant-based, oil-free eating. I had been listening to the plant-based experts such as Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Brooke Goldner, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Michael Greger. And the more I learnt, the more fascinated I became, and I made a decision that would change the whole trajectory of my life. I decided that I was going to experiment with this idea of whole food, plant-based, oil-free eating. As I understood that it was about building my meals around foods such as fruits and vegetables, leafy greens, beans, lentils, whole grains, and other minimally processed plant foods, as I understood that's what whole food, plant-based eating meant, I decided I needed to give this a try and see what it was all about. To tell you the truth, I couldn't wait to get back on my feet to get started. And I began with mucho gusto. And I wasn't starving myself. I wasn't spending every day counting calories either. I could eat whatever I wanted. And I learnt how to nourish my body. Over time, as I continued to do this, I can tell you it was possibly around 3 months. I felt energized and I lost almost 100 pounds in the process. It got me from this to this effortlessly. My mobility improved. My energy improved and my blood sugar returned to the normal range. But do you know what became even more important to me than the number on the scales? I began to understand that the choices I was making every day were affecting the environment in which my cells had to live. And that completely changed the way I thought about health. Now, even though I've mentioned that I lost almost 100 pounds in the process, I want to really emphasize that this is not just about weight loss. In fact, it's not about weight loss at all. It seems as if the weight loss was a blessed side effect of my new way of nourishing my body. You see, someone may look at insulin resistance and immediately think, right, I need to lose weight. But here on the Plant Powered Life, we're going deeper than that. We're asking, how can I support my health? How can I nourish my body? How can I support healthy metabolic function? How can I create everyday habits that support my health over the long term? Of course, weight can be a part of the conversation, but health comes first. And this is where the plant-powered life becomes so practical. After all, what does food have to do with it? Everything. You see, whole plant foods can help us to create an eating pattern which is rich in fiber, vitamins and minerals, as well as a wide variety of beneficial plant compounds. And did you notice something? We're back at fiber again. If you've been following this channel, you'll know how often fiber keeps appearing in our conversations. Vegetables, beans, lentils, fruit, whole grains, nuts and seeds. These foods don't just give us carbohydrates. You see, whole plant foods bring a package of nutrition with them. And many whole plant foods have a relatively low energy density, which can help us feel satisfied while supporting healthy weight management in the process. And here's another important part of insulin sensitivity: move your muscles. You see, when you move, whether you walk, exercise or otherwise, you create another powerful opportunity to support glucose uptake and insulin sensitivity. So again, this isn't about one magical ingredient. It's about creating a lifestyle. And that, my friends, brings me to the ABC method. Now, perhaps you're watching all of this and thinking, well, Norma Elaine, all of this does make sense, but what do I actually do? That, my friend, is precisely why I created the Plant Power Lifestyle, the ABC method. You see, information is only useful if we can turn it into something practical. And that reminds me of the other saying, knowledge is power. But knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is not power, because it's only power if you put it to use, in the same way that information is only useful if we can turn it into something practical. Now, the ABC method gives us 3 simple principles. A, add. Start by adding more of the nourishing whole plant foods your body needs. Instead of beginning with, I can't have this, I can't eat that, I've got to give everything up, we start somewhere completely different. What can I add? Could I add another vegetable? Could I add beans? Could I add lentils? Could I add fruit? Could I add some leafy greens? Add nourishment. Then we go to B, build. We build better meals, build a nourishing plate, we build variety, we build fiber into the day, we build meals that actually will satisfy you. Because guess what? We're not trying to survive on a few lettuce leaves. We're learning how to create abundant, nourishing meals. And then we go to C. We create. We create the lifestyle that makes those choices easier to repeat. We create a shopping routine. We create time to prepare our food. Batch cook if that helps you. Hydrate, drink more water. Move your body every day. Rest, reflect, and then guess what? Repeat. Because quite simply, one healthy meal isn't going to create a healthy lifestyle. It's what we do repeatedly that begins to shape our habits. So we add, we build, and we create. Small steps, big change, lasting health. So, friend or foe, let's return to where we began. Is glucose our friend or our foe? Well, perhaps now we can see that it's the wrong question if we treat glucose itself as either good or bad. Glucose does have an important physiological purpose. It is fuel. Our cells need energy. Insulin has an important purpose too. It's a messenger helping the body to regulate and use that fuel. The real problem, my friend, begins when this beautifully coordinated system becomes disrupted and tissues stop responding appropriately to insulin. That is insulin resistance. And I can tell you this, if that process continues, the consequences can extend far beyond a single blood glucose reading, which is exactly where we're going next. So before you go for today, I have one practical thing that I'd like to ask you to do. It's your homework. At your next meal, don't immediately think, what do I need to remove? Instead, ask this question: what nourishing whole plant food can I add? Remember, perhaps some leafy greens, some beans, lentils, broccoli, whole grains, or fruit. Then ask yourself, have I moved my body today? And that's it. One meal, one choice, one walk. Small steps, my friend, small steps. So did you know that glucose isn't simply something harmful floating around in your bloodstream? Did you know that it has a purpose? And did you know that insulin resistance can begin when tissues stop responding appropriately to insulin? Well, now you know. And in our next plant-powered health video, my friend, we are going to go deeper. So please make sure you're subscribed, because I post here every weekday as we continue this plant-powered health journey together. And if you're ready to move beyond simply knowing what to do and actually start putting it into practice, take a look at the plant-powered lifestyle, the ABC method. It's linked in the description below. So if you found this video of value today, please do like, subscribe, and share it with someone whom you believe might find value in it too. Until next time, my friend, keep nourishing those cells, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for